Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Ah, hope you're all having a fantastic day. There are stories that glow in the dark, small, private recollections that find their way out of the corners of a marriage and into the public light like fireflies escaping a mason jar. This is one of those stories. It begins, as many small catastrophes do, with breakfast. Kelly still remembers the light that morning. The kitchen windows of their suburban home cut the early sun into neat, warm squares across the maple table, and the house hummed with the kind of domestic contentment celebrities never show on morning television. There were cereal bowls, a stack of mail that would remain half-shelled for days, the yoga mat slung over the banister like a lazy flag. Mark was at the counter, his hands in orchestra, coffee, bagel, jam, words tumbling out between motions. Their children were in varying degrees of turbulence. An argument about sneakers, a plea for an extra 5 minutes of screen time, a furtive shedding of homework. Kelly watched him the way she always did in those slow frames of mourning, hair messy from sleep, sleeves rolled up, a line of concentration between his eyebrows as he measured the speed of his day. He was handsome in the unvarnished way of someone comfortable in his skin. He smiled slow sideways and reached across the table for the jam, flicking a smear on her nose in a gesture that had been there since the first apartment. She laughed, and the sound spilled off the cabinets, harmless as a bell. It was one of those ordinary, beautiful moments you assume will last forever. Then, for reasons that later would be retold with different inflections, some said it was the way he bit the bagel, some said he was trying to be theatrical, other times Kelly herself joked that stars are like magnets for the ridiculous. Mark's hand made a quick, too-practiced motion, and he bit down on something hard. A jolt, a sound like a small thing breaking in the hush between people. He pushed his hand to his mouth, and there was a way his body folded into itself, as if some private pain had pulled him inward. "I bit something," he said, and there was an echo in his voice that made the words sound hollow. He held his hand to his lip. There was a flash of white. Kelly crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. Her laugh fell away. "What?" she asked. He tried to smile. "I was trying to make the rest of him, okay?" And when he pulled back his hand, his smile was wrong. The left side of it looked softer, as if the geometry of his face had subtly rearranged itself. There was a space where something should have been. A tooth gone. We tell ourselves small lies in the first moments of trouble. We tell ourselves that teeth are replaceable, that this is a trip to the dentist away from normal. But for Mark, teeth were less about function and more about the map of his face, the architecture that made his grin, so famous on their shows and in tabloid photos, sing. Kelly felt a quick, sharp grief that surprised her. It was irrational, a tooth. But the way a smile refracts light, the way a missing tooth becomes a punctuation mark in a face you know by memory, those things are oddly, viscerally intimate. "Do you want me to call someone?" Kelly asked, practical and braced. "No," Mark whispered. He was already fingering the space with the tip of his tongue, as if to test whether absence had a temperature. "I'm okay." They spent the morning in a new choreography. The kids were shepherded to school. Mark pretended he had a rehearsal. Kelly kept replaying the image of that missing white triangle. In the car, he was steady, joking between breaths, something about becoming more authentically pirate, but the jokes were thin scaffolding. When he was finally alone, he let himself slide onto the couch and watched old clips of late-night interviews where his smile was functional, candid, and utterly the shape he knew. He prodded the gap with his tongue like someone fingering a missing button on a coat. Later, when Kelly finally spoke of it publicly, so the story goes, her confession on television became a small meteor. "His entire face changed," she said, a line that spun across headlines as easily as a seed on the wind. People loved it for its dramatic simplicity. They loved the image of a woman revealing the private architecture of her spouse's face, the way the world obsessed over tiny things and turned them into mythology. But the morning and the days that followed were more complicated than the snappy headline. The loss was not merely cosmetic. It was an inciting event that unspooled deeper threads, memory and identity, the small humiliations of aging and change, laughter and mourning braided together. Mark's tooth had not merely fallen out. It had been dislodged in a minor accident, A misstep while he was clowning on a skateboard in the driveway. Yes, a skateboard, because he was 11 when he stopped and refused to stop being 11 ever since. He'd been pretending to be 20 again. Long hair in a ponytail, headset on, arms windmilling, when the world and gravity corrected him with a kindly, unbothered slap. The fall itself was comical in an embarrassing way. He tumbled on the grass, reached for the skateboard, and saw the tooth in his hand, small and stubborn as a fossil. Someone might say the tooth had been waiting its whole life to be noticed. In the days that followed, Mark became an anthropologist of his own mouth. He cataloged sensations with earnestness that was, frankly, a little cute. There was a new terminology, gaps, vestibules, prosthetics, sprinkled into ordinary conversations. He Googled options and read message boards about porcelain and implants as if preparing for an expedition. He took selfies with one side of his mouth emphasized, then deleted them. He made jokes, self-effacing, intentionally theatrical, on air. But some nights, when the house sank into a hush and the television was reduced to a dim rectangle, his eyes flickered with a tiredness Kelly had not seen before. "That missing piece doesn't change what I like about my face," he told her one evening, hands cupping a mug of tea. "But it changes how I feel about being seen." Kelly listened and understood. She heard something deeper than vanity. It wasn't just a tooth, though that was the physical fact. It was the sudden reminder that our bodies are not permanent, that the things we once took for granted might decide one day to leave. It was the odd vulnerability celebrities feel. Their faces are a currency, a public architecture everyone examines, and any small modification feels amplified by the million little eyes of the world. "What if we make a story of it?" Kelly asked, partly practical, partly sarcastic. "We could film the whole thing." Kelly, Ripa, and Mark Consuelos, teethless and thriving. Mark smiled. "You're terrible." But he also oddly liked the idea. Mark had never been one to let misfortune be only sorrow. He wanted to own it, to wrestle it into shape with quick wit and drama. He wanted to show their children, those messy, earnest kids, that losing something you love didn't mean losing yourself. So they did what they did best. They made it into a story. They invited a few cameras in, not the intrusive flash of paparazzi, but a quieter documentation. Kelly recorded the process like one might document the renovation of an old house. Careful close-ups, the names of the people who came in to help, a voiceover that reached for humor and tenderness. There were visits to dental surgeons whose politeness contrasted with the cold equipment, pages of choices between detachable dentures and surgical implants, and the odd intimacy of having tools near your jaw while someone you love watches. Their friends and colleagues became characters in the small drama, vivid counsel from a hairstylist who'd seen the red carpet up close, a dentist who compared dental architecture to bridgework, an old friend who sent a postcard that read only, "Toothlessness is the new black." Public reaction was an odd tide. Some loved the honesty. Here were two people, famous and polished, exposing a vulnerability that felt human. Others wrote the narrative as proof of something cynical, that everything would be turned into content. And of course people made memes. Mark is a pirate, Mark is a gap-toothed cherub, the missing tooth overlaid with gold-plated pirate maps. But the private moments, the ones that didn't make for easy clips, were the richest. Kelly started to write small notes and leave them in corners. "Bravery is just showing up toothless," said one card, taped to an old mirror. She liked the absurdity of it. She liked the truth. They laughed in the car when Mark attempted a flash of his new grin and accidentally knocked his head on the rearview mirror. They argued about whether to put a tiny sticker over the gap to show solidarity. Kelly lost. The first time Mark bit into a hard apple after the accident, the house held its breath. He lifted the fruit with a tiny dignity and bit down. Kelly watched from the doorway, heart lodged in her throat, and he chewed slowly, a small, defiant ceremony. He turned to her and grinned with a missing tooth, and it was, she realized, brave in a way she hadn't thought about before. The grin was uneven, yes, but it was also honest, a face reshaped by experience.